You are reading a corrupted file. The history books told you the Renaissance unlocked ancient magic, but the evidence proves they actually buried it. We found a translation glitch so severe it turned a manual for ecstasy into a philosophy textbook. For 500 years, the true archive has been silent. The official narrative is a fabrication. We are taught that Cosimo de' Medici and Marsilio Ficino were the architects of the Hermetic revival, the men who cracked the code of the Prisca Theologia. You assume they opened a portal to the mystical Egyptian past. The forensic reality is much darker. They didn't open a door, they built a firewall. This wasn't a revival, it was a sanitization operation designed to strip the Corpus Hermeticum of its operative power. The evidence of the breach lies in the authentic textual disaster of 1471. In the city of Treviso, the first printed edition of these texts hit the streets, not as a masterwork, but as an unauthorized, error-riddled mess. The printers were negligent. The text was butchered. Yet this corrupted file became the source code for 5 centuries of Western occultism. Everyone from Giordano Bruno to the modern New Age movement has been operating off a script that was broken from day one. But the suppression goes deeper than typos. It lies in the paradox of Gnosis. The original Greek texts describe a specific state of being, Gnosis, which is not intellectual knowledge, but a direct supra-rational fusion with the divine. It requires the suppression of the senses and a total exit from the body. When Ficino encountered this, he panicked. He couldn't process a knowledge that bypassed the intellect, so he patched the code. He translated Gnosis as cognitio or scientia, mere book learning or science. He took a technical manual for inducing altered states of consciousness and turned it into a safe, scholarly reader for philosophers. For decades, the academic elite, men like André-Jean Festugière, dismissed the visionary accounts in these texts as literary fictions. They claimed the ecstasies were metaphors because they were too terrified to admit that the myths were actually protocols for ritual hallucination. They wanted you to think this was just literature. They wanted you to believe the Hermetic tradition was about reading ancient books. But the forensic audit suggests the text was never meant to be read. It was a trigger, and they did everything in their power to make sure you never pulled it. Here is where the glitch destroys the system. The tragedy isn't just that they got the words wrong, it's that they fundamentally misunderstood the operating system of the human mind. We are conditioned to believe that reading, reasoning, and logic are the only reliable paths to understanding. The Renaissance humanists believed this too. They worshipped logos, reasoned discourse. But the Hermetic Archive explicitly states that logic is a trap. The texts lay out a strict hierarchy of knowledge. At the bottom is logos. It prepares you. It guides the mind up to a point. But the texts warn that reasoned discourse does not get to the truth. It hits a dead end. To breach that wall, you must switch operating systems entirely. You must move from logos to gnosis. This isn't intellectual learning, it is a biological hijack. The text describes it as divine silence, a state where you are paralyzed, your senses are completely suppressed, and you are flooded with a vision that would shatter a normal mind. And here is the smoking gun. When Marsilio Ficino sat down to translate these dangerous instructions in 1463, he blinked. He couldn't process the idea of a knowledge that bypassed the rational intellect, so he sanitized it. Every time the Greek text demanded gnosis, this ecstatic, supra-rational fusion, Ficino translated it as cognitio or scientia. He took a word that meant altering your consciousness and turned it into doing your homework. He took a technical manual for ecstasy and turned it into a philosophy textbook. The result is a historical hallucination. For 5 centuries, Western occultists have been reading Ficino's translation, believing that if they just memorized enough charts and debated enough theory, they would become magicians. They were reading a map that had the destination erased. Ficino did this because he was modeling his translation on the Asclepius, a safer, theoretical text that contains almost no instructions for ecstatic practice. He didn't know what to look for, so he didn't see it. But once you strip away his errors and read the raw data, the picture changes instantly. You realize that the myths aren't stories, they are protocols, and the entities they describe, the forces that occupy the human psyche, are not metaphors, they are parasites. Here is the evidence the historians tried to soften. The official narrative claims the tormentors described in Corpus Hermeticum 13 are metaphors for bad habits, that lust or wrath are just personality flaws you can fix with therapy. That is a lie. The dossier explicitly identifies them as 12 distinct, irrational forces that literally possess the human nervous system. Ignorance, grief, deceit. These aren't just emotions, they are occupying forces. The text states they use the prison of the body to torture the inward person. It's a hostile takeover. Here is the nuance the translations obscured. You cannot negotiate with these entities. The archive describes a brutal, mechanical process of displacement. It's a numbers game. 12 tormentors against 10 powers. To survive, you must invoke the 10, forces like joy, truth, and life, to physically drive the 12 out of your biology. The text calls it an inner exorcism. When the divine powers enter, the tormentors are vanquished and fly away in a flapping of wings. This isn't philosophy, it is spiritual warfare. And this is where the glitch becomes a weapon. The text claims this process changes your actual physical composition. You aren't just becoming a better person, you are exiting your composed form and entering an immortal body. I am not what I was before, the initiate claims. Color, touch, or size I no longer have. But the price of entry is total system failure. To let the powers in, you must shut the machine down. Sensory deprivation, divine silence. If you move, if you look, if you speak, the transfer fails. The vision of beauty requires you to be paralyzed, practically comatose to the outside world, while your internal reality is dismantled and rebuilt. Pause the video. Think about your own life. Have you ever felt a sudden, irrational wave of grief or rage that felt like it wasn't yours, like something else was pulling the levers? The Hermeticists would say that wasn't a mood swing, that was an entity. Tell me in the comments, are you driving the car, or are you just a passenger? The Renaissance translators like Marsilio Ficino saw this madness and panicked. They wanted a safe, scholarly Hermes, a respectable theologian. They sanitized the text because they feared the implications of the divine frenzy. But there was one investigator, Lodovico Lazzarelli, who didn't flinch. He realized that without the terror of the exorcism, the philosophy is useless. He knew that to find the truth, you have to be willing to lose your mind. Everything you've been told about the Hermetic tradition is a containment strategy. The Renaissance didn't revive Hermes, they handcuffed him. They took a radical technology for becoming God, literally entering the mental spheres of the Ogdoad and the Ennead, and reduced it to a polite dinner party conversation about theology. They stripped out the operative code because they were terrified of the result. You have been looking at a containment strategy and calling it wisdom. The archive was never meant to be studied. It was meant to be performed. The tormentors occupying your nervous system cannot be debated away. They must be evicted. The text is just the trigger mechanism for that exorcism. The forensic audit is complete. We know now that the literary fictions were actually protocols for a biological breach into the divine. The glitch in the translation has been exposed. You have the choice Marsilio Ficino was too afraid to make. Keep reading the manual, or finally, run the program. True knowledge demands your silence.